Hey everybody, Samwise Community Herbalist here, and today we're talking about the energy of maple, which is the herb of the month for February, which is about the time where I am in the world where some of the snow and ice starts to melt a little bit and some of the tree sap begins running in maple. And I've always been really curious about maple as a tree. It doesn't really show up a lot in some of the Western herbals, and I've always been really curious about that because it's so present. It's so yeah, just here in our forests and here in like the cities. And so I got curious about medicinal uses of maple and did a little research, and here's some of what I found. That the tea made from the inner bark of the maple tree, particularly like I've been looking at sugar maples and red maples, but in particular sugar maple, which is what the tree that is tapped to make maple syrup oftentimes. So the tea from the inner bark is said to be a blood tonic and a liver tonic, so helpful for like moving out stagnant energy, and obviously the liver and associated organs helps like clean the blood of any toxins. It's also known to be a diuretic and an expectorant. Diuretic means like helpful to help you pee, an express fluid, and an expectorant, meaning that helpful for like coughs or like helping congested mucus kind of get up and out of the lungs, which is really interesting because a big association with maple is that it's a tree of balance. And I really like thinking about it like that because it encourages me to think about how I can be more in balance with my surroundings, my environment, the earth, and also more in balance with different aspects of my life. In the tarot deck that I use, the Tarot Plants by Heather Enders, who's a patron and is awesome, the Two of Pentacles is symbol is maple, and I pull this card all the time. And for me, it's a reminder to like find flexibility and balance in my work, and in like kind of how I'm using my energy. So like making sure that outflow of energy is matched with how I'm like receiving and like giving myself energy. And that can be really hard to remember. And so that card comes up a lot when I'm like in risk of burning out. And I really like that energy of balance is a part of this being's medicine, both in like the physicality as like a blood tonic and like a diuretic. So we're helping to balance the hormones, we're helping to balance the fluids, the expectorant. And there's also some research that the leaves and bark and potentially the sap may be helpful for regulating blood sugar and reducing inflammation. There's some like research at the University of Rhode Island right now that's kind of exploring that, which I love, that it's like thinking about, you know, balancing blood sugar when it is of itself this like amazing, beautiful, blessed source of sweetness in the world. And so the sap itself is considered like a spring tonic. It has a ton of minerals, it has a ton of vitamins. I've never tried freshly tapped sap from a maple tree. I'm hoping to try it soon at some point in the early spring. And I'm hoping to make like a podcast about maple later this month, where hopefully I might get to try that. We'll see. But the thing about it is it takes a ton of sap to make a small amount of syrup. And like one of the ratios is like 32 liters of sap makes 1 liter of syrup. That's a lot of sap from like these beautiful trees, right? And it's their blood, it's tree blood that is sap. And so for me, that really has me thinking about like reciprocity and balance with these trees and with the earth and with the original caretakers of this land, because that's a lot of taking. That's a lot of like taking of life force from these trees that are very giving. So what are the ways in which we can give back? And that's some of what I want to explore in like the medicine making video for this month is like, what's the medicine of giving of ourselves back to the earth, and what are some ways that we as humans, and particularly we as like settlers, speaking from my position, can give to the original peoples of this land and begin to address the imbalance of energy that's been there for hundreds of years. So yeah, again, balance, right? So thinking about that in its like physical medicine, and also in its like spiritual and community medicine. So yeah, I'm kind of pulling from this source called Druid Garden, which is a really interesting source for like medicinal and magical associations and uses of plants. And that source says that sugar maple is often critical to the health of the forest around it, and it's often found in pairings with beech, with birch, with oak, with ash. Ash in this area, ash trees in particular, are at risk of dying from parasites. I think it's called the ash borer beetle, or the ash beetle. I forget how to say it correctly. But yeah, a lot of ash trees are at risk because of that. And so like having these encouraging the growth of sugar maples is really important for the whole of the health of the community of trees. And it's interesting to note that sugar maples in particular are really sensitive to toxicity, right? Which is interesting because it's also a liver tonic. But that's why you won't see as many sugar maples thriving near roads. They're really sensitive to car exhaust, to the salt when it snows. I've learned they salt the roads to prevent the roads from getting really icy, which is really dangerous. But that salt can have a lot of detrimental effects on the plant life immediately surrounding it. So yeah, you have to kind of go more into the forest to encounter the sugar maples for that reason. So a little bit more about maple, different like medicinal uses across time and across different communities. Yeah, doing some research around how like different indigenous communities use maple, pulled up a lot of different things. Some of which has to do with like the liver and the spleen. Some of also has to do with like treating sore eyes, like using the sap as like an eye tonic, and some other like use of the bark with like gynecological or like generative organ support, particularly the uterus. And what I am noticing as I dig into this lore and like attempting to understand it from indigenous worldviews is that I did not earn access to learning about this plant from indigenous worldviews. Like I'm kind of getting that sense of like imbalance when I'm kind of tapping into this energy of like, wow, so much has been stolen and so much has been taken from indigenous peoples, and I'm kind of wanting to like learn about this particular plant and like regurgitate facts about it, but like that's missing a big piece about the cultural context in which people's relationships to maple occurred. And my felt sense of the tree itself when I approach it is like big Mother Earth energy, like big mama energy, and like nurturing energy. But even like the most giving and generous of mothers need to have boundaries and need to have a way to say like, no, actually I will not give in all contexts if something is harming me. So that's what I'm kind of like energetically encountering, and I think that's actually really helpful to get like an energetic like no, and to recognize when we get an energetic no from a plant or from peoples or from whatever context, and that is really good practice for cultivating humility, cultivating consent, cultivating understanding of like the actual conditions that are surrounding in which I exist. And so what was interesting was, in the source that I mentioned there, they talk about like lore and stories surrounding maple that talk about a gift that takes work. And so that's what I am hoping to cultivate over my lifetime, is the gift of understanding and relationship, and knowing that gift of understanding and connection will take a lot of work and take a lot of like unlearning of white supremacy, and then like unlearning of the ways in which we just kind of like take without thinking. And I'm thinking, you know, of these like giant like jugs of maple syrup that we can get, that I eat, you know, as a vegan. I'm just like, nah. But just thinking about like how very much like tree blood it took to make that kind of is giving me some pause, and thinking about like, again, like how can I restore balance? How can I be a participant and like be in reciprocity with these tree beings that are really giving, and you know, like it's necessary that we have that interplay and that reciprocity with it. So yeah, that's a lot of what I'm kind of finding with the energy of maple, which in itself is like a beautiful gift. And yeah, and again, like tapping more on this like theme of balance. Folks note that the sap usually runs between Imbolc, which is February 2nd, or depending on, I think, I'm not exactly sure if it's moon-based, but I understand it's early February, and the spring equinox. And then, of course, the maple leaves, right, can be really vibrant and fiery and beautiful depending on what's happening with the temperature and the weather. And those leaves can change color and fall between the fall equinox and Samhain, or Halloween. And so it's kind of like in a tree of the equinoxes in that sense. And again, that's the equinoxes when there's balance, there's equal light and equal dark in where we're at in the earth. So yeah, I love that. And I love that the flower essences, I'm looking at Green Hope Essences as a source. It says, this essence shares the wisdom of the maple tree to help us feel rooted in our lives, embraced by the expanse of sky, and nourished by the sweetness of life, and at peace with the self and all creation. So balance. So you're held above and below, and you're also like touching the sweetness of what is here in the in-between, but also finding ways to be in balance and reciprocity with all that is. So that's a little bit about maple. And yeah, I'd love to hear about your experiences with this tree, with the syrup, if that's the case. Yeah, go ahead and put them in the comments if you'd like. And of course, thank you as always to my generous patrons, all the people who support my work and the educational offerings that I put out. I am so grateful to have the support of this learning community and magical community, and I'm excited to keep going with the energy of balance and like see what comes through, because balance is also change, and like change, like Octavia Butler says, is God. So just kind of tapping into that equilibrium and that like calling in the embracing of change is a beautiful liberatory practice. So I encourage you to experiment with that and see if maple can help you find some footing and some grounding in that change of equilibrium. And happy plant connecting. All right, till next time.